Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. I wanted to explore some stuff, and if you're over on Patreon, you've already seen kind of the beginnings of my thought process on this. Again, you can go subscribe over there for free if you want. That's where the article is free if you want to go take a look. Patreon.com/pack_daddy. But I want to kind of walk through this a little bit. And we talked about this actually yesterday, this conversation, at least half of it. And that was the whole aggressive defense thing. Jacob Morley saying, I want a chaos agent. I don't really want a DC that dares the opposing offense to put together 15-play drives. Aaron Nagler saying, been saying this as well. I'm tired of limiting explosive plays while the opponent paper cuts us to death. So we talked about that already, right? It's an interesting conversation, et cetera, et cetera. Well, then today I see that John Kuhn responded. He says, do you like analytics? And Aaron Nagler says they can be a useful tool. And then he posts a chart. It is defensive coverage usage weeks 1 through 16, which is random. It also is why I was frustrated to find out that some of the data was wrong when I went over to the source itself. But it's close enough. There's only a couple weeks that were cut off. But it just shows all 32 teams, and then the different coverage usage, I guess. You got cover 0, cover 1, cover 2 man, and then cover 2, cover 3, cover 4, cover 6. And then it's, what percentage they do each one. There's a lot here. There's 224 individual cells, so my ability to look at it and go, oh, this is clearly what John Kuhn is getting at, I have no idea. In fact, the Aaron down below says, what exactly is the point you're trying to make with this? Which was my thought exactly, because aside from context clues, which would be that John Kuhn is disagreeing with the aggression thing, I don't know what this chart is supposed to be telling me because it's just all over the place. But I thought, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we actually put this in a format where I can kind of play with this and look at it, and maybe I'll be able to see a little better what it is that John Kuhn is trying to tell me. So, with the help of my handy-dandy friend, Mr. AI, I had it take the image, turn it into a CSV so I can put it into Excel, and then kind of play with some of the numbers. That way I can kind of take a look at a couple different things. Number one, just for curiosity's sake, what are most teams doing? I didn't actually set out to do that, but I was shocked to see how...
Zuzu. Colin, get ready for the play.
Okay. How similar NFL teams were, and it wasn't what I thought. If you would have just asked me off the top of my head, I would have said, yeah, probably... I don't know, 75 to 80% are in primarily, or their highest usage would be cover 2. Turns out, no. 26 out of 32 teams have their highest percentage of coverage in cover 3. Didn't know that. But as I started looking at it and started trying to, again, put this in some kind of a format that I can actually visualize and understand what is interesting about this chart, that stood out to me right away. But the other thing, the main thing, is I was looking for correlation. I wanted to see the correlation between the different coverages and the EPA per dropback, which is what this is. It's what the chart also shows. So there's the coverage, and then there's the EPA per dropback of the team, not so much the coverage. So again, the first thing that kind of stood out, and these are just little things that I noticed along the way, and this is why it's kind of fun to kind of play around with data, because number one, you notice things and you learn things that even you weren't expecting, but also it just kind of makes you question stuff. The other thing that popped out is that there is no style, because again, we love being very black and white, myself included. I think unless and until we learn otherwise, we tend to default to black and white. And so, for example, when Jeff Hafley came into the onto the scene in Green Bay, what did we learn? He's a cover 3 guy. So I think for most of us, you think that means The majority of the time he'll play cover 3, whether that's, 70, 80, 90%. Nobody plays any style of coverage even 50% of the time. The highest that I can find is the Falcons playing the Raiders playing cover 3 46% of the time. You've got teams also like the Broncos that the highest percentage of in any one coverage is 25%, cover 1 and cover 3, 25%. So nobody is doing everything all the time. Also, there are only just a handful of dominant coverage types. Everybody uses those, and the other ones, everybody uses very sparingly. There are a couple exceptions, but for example, everybody uses cover 3 a ton. The lowest cover 3 usage in the NFL is 23%. That's the Vikings. Most teams also use a heavy dose of cover 1, cover 2, cover 4, and then cover 6 kind of 50-50. So cover 6 is the outlier in which, half the teams are double-digit percentage, half the teams are single-digit percentage. And then as far as cover 0, which is, again, that's like hyper-aggressive, all this stuff, nobody runs cover 0 a lot. The team that uses it the most, and this data is one of the things that has changed, but as of, the through week 16 is the Broncos at 7%. So if you hear about a guy that likes to run cover 0, the blitzing man, all that, nobody does that at a rate that is significant. Cover 2 man. You've got a quarter of the league doesn't run it, including the Packers. They're at 0. And the Bills run it the most at 6%. So again, you've got your main coverages, which I would say the main coverage is cover 3 by a mile. After that is probably cover 2, where everybody runs it a pretty good amount with a very few exceptions. The Saints at 7%, the Falcons at 3%. Falcons are interesting. I kind of talked about that Packernet After Dark. 49ers and Texans at 5% and 7%. I kind of thought through a lot of this stuff and then had AI, write the article so it actually, sounds great and not just my jumbled thoughts. And occasionally it puts together some banger quotes, so I'll defer to it occasionally. The way that it kind of said what I'm trying to say right now is the NFL is not choosing between chaos and conservatism on every snap. It's choosing when to deviate from a very stable baseline. Cover 3 isn't the opposite of aggression. It's the default structure from which aggression is selectively deployed. This is kind of important because it's a part of a larger picture that there isn't a thing called aggression. What I mean by that is there's never going to be a defense that just does the thing all the time. There might not be any. And you say, well, what about Minnesota? Listen, different teams have different staffs, different teams have different players, and those coordinators have to make decisions based on the players that they have at their disposal. It's entirely possible again, we did this with Jeff Hafley. Well, look what he did over here, and then he gets here and he doesn't do it. Why didn't he do it here? Because he doesn't have the guys to do it. He doesn't have the corners to play press man coverage. I'm sure he would have loved to, but he doesn't have the guys, so he didn't do it. All right, so moving on to sort of the correlation thing. Which coverages actually did the best? Cover 6, cover 2 man, and cover 4. Those were the 3 strongest in terms of the best results. Interestingly enough, those are not one of the main coverages that teams use all the time, which seems stupid on its face. Why not just run that all the time? Or how about we just find a guy, okay, so cover 6 is the best. Who runs cover 6 the most? It's the Jaguars and Eagles 21% of the time. Go get those guys and then thrive, Let me read here. Cover 6 shows the strongest negative correlation in the data set, and almost nobody runs it as a primary coverage. That should immediately raise questions. If cover 6 was simply better, teams would build defenses around it. They don't, because cover 6 is situational by design. It is matchup aware, directionally tilted, and highly dependent on both personnel and offensive tendency. It's not meant to be spammed. And this gets into my play-action analogy that I use regularly. Play action, your EPA per play is so high on play action. Why don't you do play action more? Maybe it's high because we don't run it all the time. As soon as it becomes predictable, it loses its potency. Or as the article put it, its effectiveness depends on scarcity. So cover 6 works because it's deployed selectively and intelligently, not because it's universally superior. I mean, and we should know this on its face. Any coverage can be beat. It's not true that there's just a coverage that is just so good all the time. It really is a question of which ones do you use and in what situations. The same logic applies to when we look at cover 2 zone, which also helps explain why correlation alone can't give us clean answers. Only 2 teams run cover 2 as their most used coverage. The Vikings are tied for the second lowest EPA per dropback in the league. The Dolphins sit near the bottom of the league. Now, right off the bat, that should raise a billion questions now. So, cover 2 zone is, according to the sheet, that's why we're talking about cover 2 zone, the worst defensive coverage that you can use. It is also the second most popular coverage in the NFL. It's also used by the Minnesota Vikings, one of the best teams in football, the second most often. It is the Vikings' number 1 coverage scheme, cover 2. Also, cover 2 is very well known as a very bend, don't break style. It's probably the least aggressive from a coverage standpoint, kind of a scheme or coverage scheme. How in the world are we talking about the most aggressive, one of the most aggressive defenses in football, if not the most aggressive defenses in football, as being a, primary is the wrong word, but I'll use it because I can't think of a better one, primarily cover 2 zone football team? So again, the fact that the Vikings and Dolphins sit on opposite sides of the scale, despite primarily employing cover 2, again, I'm using primarily incorrectly, but you get what I'm saying. It's less than 50%, but it is their number 1 coverage scheme. That is a point in and of itself. That cover 2 is the least successful overall in the NFL. However, it is employed primarily by the Vikings, who have one of the best coverage. If you look at the EPA per play, they're, top 5, let's say. I don't know exactly how high, but they are top 5, and I don't think they're number 1. So let's just call it top 5. Talks a little bit more about cover 2 and the fact that it's seen as this sort of, bend, don't break, and also safe coverages. It says cover 2 is not inherently safe. In fact, the data suggests it may be one of the more fragile structures in football if the personnel and execution aren't exactly right. It demands corners who can tackle, safeties who can diagnose instantly, and linebackers who can survive in space. When those conditions aren't met, it doesn't bend, it leaks. And then it goes in and talks about the different coverages and what you would typically see as how aggressive they are. So if you rank them from most aggressive to least aggressive, cover 0, maximum chaos, maximum volatility. Cover 1, high aggression, matchup driven. Cover 2, man-controlled aggression with safety help. Cover 3, structured pressure, eyes on the quarterback. Cover 4, explosive play denial through pattern matching. Cover 6, situational bend with intentional constraints. Cover 2 zone, classic bend, don't break. And again, very odd that the Vikings tend to be more cover 2 than almost any other team in the NFL. It says a defense can play cover 4 aggressively, a defense can play cover 1 timidly. Scheme alone does not tell the story. So first of all, just to hearken back to this thing, and again, I still don't know what exactly John Kuhn is trying to show us here, because if he's trying to argue with Aaron Nagler about this, this chart itself is saying more aggressive coverages are more successful in the NFL. So I don't know what exactly the point of this this is. I guess because the Texans are at the top and they're I don't know, more heavily zone, I guess, but I mean, so is everybody, and it's not normal. All right, that's not unusual. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure what the point of that was, but I don't think it made the point that it was supposed to make. But even if it did, it wouldn't matter, because you can't determine how aggressive a team is by what type of coverage, at what percentage of coverage that they play. If you could, the Minnesota Vikings would be the second least aggressive team in the entire NFL, and in fact, they might be the most aggressive team in the NFL. The fact of the matter is, there are other variables that determine whether a team is aggressive. For example, blitz rate. If you look at that, guess who's number one? The Minnesota Vikings. Oh. But that alone doesn't determine aggression either. There's a lot of variables that go into aggression. But you certainly cannot just look at coverage shells and determine how aggressive a team is. Anyways, I want to run through the last part of this, article here, and then take a break and kind of think through part two, which is kind of where my head is at on some of this stuff. So it says, what the data can give us. Number one, selection bias is real. The coverage that correlates best with defensive success are almost never base defenses. That strongly suggests their effectiveness may depend on being used sparingly and strategically, not repeatedly. If coverages only work when offenses don't expect it, the takeaway isn't run it more, it's run it better. Number two, personnel changes everything. Coverage isn't a spell you cast, and it's an agreement between 11 specific players. This is why I like reading it sometimes. They can just articulate things better than I can. You don't call cover zero because you're brave. You call it because you trust your corners, your safeties, and your pass rush. You don't live in cover two man without elite corners. You don't major in quarters without safeties who can diagnose and tackle. Personnel determines possibility. This is a very important point as we get into the second part of the podcast. The real takeaway, the lesson here isn't that aggressive defenses are bad, and it isn't that bend don't break is optimal. The real takeaway is that good defenses are adaptive, not ideological. And this is going to be a real problem for all of us because all of us want a guy that has a certain ideology. And believe me, I get it. I want a guy to come in here and I want to see an aggressive defense. But we shouldn't actually want an aggressive defense. Maybe what we should want is for the right answer to happen to be an aggressive defense. But at the end of the day, if that isn't the right answer, we should all be rooting for the person who comes in here to give us the right answer. No matter what that answer is, whether we like it or not. If the right answer is bend, don't break, which it very much might be with the corners that we have and the certain structure that we have a team that is built for a four-man rush and a lot of extra help to help our corners. It's not to say we can't start working in a certain direction to see if we can't add some pieces that can maybe make us a little bit more aggressive here and there. Fine. But if the answer is bend, don't break, then that's what we're going to run. And the fact of the matter is, why do we keep getting the same, type of defenses with all the different defensive coordinators? Because coordinators are not coming in here with their schemes. They're coming in here diagnosing our roster and our team and then employing that roster out on the field. It has changed a little bit over time. It's different, in different years. Jair gave us a little bit of a different dimension for a little bit of a while when he was on top of things. And at various times we had good and bad safeties, good and bad corners, good, bad, better pass rush. So we'll see what the answer is depending on the person that comes in here and what they decide to do. Anyways, continuing. What fans are reacting to isn't cover three itself, it's predictability. It's a sense that offenses know what's coming, know where the soft spots are, and know they won't be challenged. And I think that's exactly correct. And it's why I think fans would get on board with a less aggressive defense if it didn't feel like this. Let me read that again. Predictable. Offenses know what's coming. They know where the soft spots are, and they know they're not going to be challenged. These are kind of the minor tweaks from within. You know what I mean? There's the big picture, the medium picture, the small picture, the micro picture, nano picture, nano pico, the pico picture, femto picture. What is after fem? I think that's right? Nano, pico, nano, micro, no, milli, micro, nano, pico, femto, I think. It doesn't matter. It's been a while since I've done that. Let me try this again, and I won't say stupid stuff. What fans are reacting to isn't cover three, it's predictability. It's the sense that offenses know what's coming, they know where the soft spots are, they know they won't be challenged. Chaos isn't a coverage. Chaos is what happens when an offense can't get comfortable, when it can't settle into rhythm, and when it has to hesitate when the answers aren't obvious, which, by the way, this brings me right back to the guy that I keep talking about, which is Jim Leonard. So one of the things when I was researching the different defensive coordinators and their schemes and philosophies, one of the things that came up about Jim Leonard is a thing called answer denial. The defense, it's a coverage thing. The defense is designed so that whatever read the quarterback thinks is right before the snap becomes wrong after the snap. Answer denial. When it can't settle, can't get into a rhythm, it hesitates, and when the answers aren't obvious. That's what Packer fans are asking for, not reckless, not zero blitzes, just answers. I tend to think that that's correct, although I still think we would all be happy with aggression. I get that. All right, let's take our first break. I want to kind of take this and then kind of, again, what the heck does this mean now? We'll be right back. Now, I've already kind of laid this out, but the thought process that I had, and again, I didn't want to, but I kind of got off and running on Packernet After Dark to get out in front of myself. But if you didn't listen to it, this will all be new to you. The problem with trying to determine like who's going to be the best defensive coordinator, it's such an impossible task. Because even though I think it's true that there are certain styles of defense that tend to disrupt current modern offenses, whatever that happens to be today. Meaning it's not completely useless to say, should we run this scheme or that scheme or whatever? I want to be like Baltimore. I think that there's utility to that. But I think there's bigger and more important questions. When we look back at this sort of experiment that we ran through, the biggest thing is, again, there is a base that everybody runs out of, right? Everybody's kind of doing the same, but not really the same, but as far as coverages and whatnot, a lot of people are doing very similar or the same types of stuff. The question is, when do you deviate and how do you deviate? And that comes down to your ability to identify the right times and spots to do things. This is why, like when I talk about Matt LaFleur being a brilliant offensive mind or whatever, it's not that he has like drawn up these crazy plays that are just, he's running plays that pretty much everybody runs. I don't know that there's a single play in his playbook that isn't in somebody else's playbook. It's not to say he hasn't come up with something. I'm sure there's been a couple times he's come up with his own little gem, which is great. But I mean, 99% of the time, he's running pretty basic plays. And even the slightly less basic plays are plays that everybody else has. So what makes him so freaking smart? It starts with the game plan for your upcoming opponent, identifying their weaknesses, understanding your own personnel and your own scheme. What is it we're trying, when I say scheme, I'm saying what is it we're trying to accomplish? It's more big picture than just like, well, outside zone or inside zone or West Coast, There's a big picture philosophy of how we want to stress a defense. That's the scheme. And then there's the how we do it. And that's where the schemes can kind of deviate from one another. That's where Shanahan and McVay and Matt LaFleur and Mike McCarthy, who's also West Coast, very different style of West Coast guy, they all differ. They're all trying to answer the big question of how to attack a defense the same way, but in different styles, different ways of doing that. We want to stretch out the defense, horizontally, and we want to stretch out the defense vertically. And so we're going to do that with this, or we're going to, utilize the tight ends or the run game or the running back in the passing game or all these different things that we're going to do. And you saw McDaniel over in Miami, who mastered the element of speed. He's got speed, two of the fastest receivers in football and the fastest running back, and they use speed to stretch out the field in different ways. Other teams might utilize more motion, right? So there's an overarching philosophy for each different scheme of how to stress an offense. Same as there is with the defense. But it starts with that game plan for Matt LaFleur or anybody else and saying, okay, here's our opponent. Here's what they do. Here's the best way to answer my question of stressing their team in the way that I like to stress teams. And here's how best to do it, not just with scheme, but the scheme is a function of my players. How I answer that question is because of the players. What they did in Miami, they did it a certain way because he had so much speed. In Green Bay, they do it a different way because you have Jordan Love at quarterback, you have Tucker at tight end, you have Watson as your speed receiver, you have these different components. That means when I answer that question, I look at my players and I say, here is how I think would be best to do that. Then you got Shanahan. He's looking at saying, well, I got Christian McCaffrey and I got George Kittle with a more, good but not quite Hall of Fame level quarterback. And so again, we're all answering the question in the same way or trying to accomplish the same goal, but doing it in a different way because of the players that we have. So you've done all that now. I've figured out, okay, we got the big picture thing that we're trying to accomplish, how to apply it to this particular defense based on what that defense likes to do, and then how to do that specifically with my players. Then there is on game day calling plays, and that is a massively complex thing. Because it's not just a function of like I play Madden where I just flip through and be like, this one looks cool, and I push a button. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. You're trying to determine based on their tendencies what they're going to do and how we can best utilize, on and on and on and on and on. These are all the most important things. And Matt LaFleur's ability to check all of those boxes is why he's in the position he's in. And that doesn't even speak to the part about how we have to train our guys to do those things, which is to some degree, to a large degree, the guys beneath you. You got an offensive coordinator, and then you got the guys below that are trying to train these guys up. But the point is, when you look at a defensive coordinator, yes, it's definitely going to be helpful. Let's put it this way: all things being equal, I would like to pick a guy from that sort of Vikings or Ravens tree, if at all possible. Again, all things being equal, but that isn't the primary driver here. When we look at that the coverage thing again, again, cover 2, the second highest is the Vikings, right? That's kind of friggin' weird. But then you can look all the way down here and say the team that runs it, one of the least, is the Texans. Elite defense. The second least is the Eagles, who have a good defense. If you look at cover 0, again, very few people run cover 0, but some teams do. And the ones that do the most, you got the Chiefs. Maybe not the greatest this year, but obviously very dangerous. You got the Broncos. Holy crap, that's a good defense. You got the Ravens. Again, maybe not this year, but that's a good defense. The Vikings at 6%. That's obviously a good defense. On the other side, though, the team that runs it the least, the Texans. The Texans don't do a lot of this stuff. They don't do a lot of this man coverage type of stuff. They're hanging back in zone. They're not doing hardly any cover 2, but they're running a ton of cover 3, cover 4, cover 6, right? Your zone coverage type of things, and they're hanging back. When I went to track down this sheet, it's over at Fantasy Points, which unfortunately they don't have a lot of defensive stuff. It's a lot of offensive things, and especially player specific as opposed to team specific. But they did have a couple things on here. And one of them did help me a little bit, and that is looking at, as I said, blitzing. In fact, actually, I don't even think it was on here. It was somewhere else. It was here at Sharp Football, looking at blitz rate. Vikings, 48%. Like I said, aggressive, right? Almost 50%. In fact, the next highest is the Falcons at 34%. Another little sidebar thing that's worth considering. Okay, so that's a good thing. Except the Rams, who have one of the best, if not the best defenses, depending on how you want to view it, had the second lowest blitz rates. Right? Vikings, 48%, incredibly high. Falcons, 34%, the second highest, garbage defense. Broncos, 32%, good defense. You got, let's see, who else has a good defense here? Bears are 28%. They did not have a good defense at all. Browns at 27.8%. They have a good defense. Patriots at 27.2%. The Saints, terrible defense, right in the middle there at 25%. The Cardinals, terrible defense, 23.9%. The Texans defense down here at 21.9%, 49ers 21.7%. There's like no correlation here. Because again, it's not should we blitz more or less. It's just it comes down to the team and the personnel and the coach, the defensive coordinator, making it work with the personnel you have. The Rams have the luxury of not blitzing because they've got, Jared Verse, they've got Byron Young. They got guys that can get after the quarterback. So they have the luxury of being able to sit back. So they don't need it. So they don't do it. It doesn't matter. Texans, same thing. They've got an elite pass rush duo. They don't need to blitz. They do. They don't need to. They're, bottom half, middle of the bottom half, bottom quarter, bottom third. The Falcons have a high blitz rate. And the reason I thought that was interesting is because it makes me wonder about Morris, the former head coach who potentially could be our next defensive coordinator. It's interesting because you think about him as a not aggressive person. He's more of a Fangio too high kind of a guy. Well, again, the Vikings are a too high team and they blitz all the time. So does it matter if they're a too high team? Does that have anything to do with blitzing? Well, Fangio doesn't really like to blitz, except Fangio's been adapting a little bit more. But also, maybe he's just doing it because their pass rushers are dog crap and they don't have a choice. And if Raheem Morris came over here, that 34% blitz rate, which everybody would probably be talking about, and he's the second highest blitz rate, expect him to be aggressive, that's going to drop back down to roughly where we were, which is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth lowest blitz rate at 21%. And we're all going to sit here and go, what the heck? I thought he was going to be aggressive. I thought we were going to be blitzing. And he's like, yeah, bro, that's when I didn't have Micah Parsons on my team. If you look at light box versus heavy box, the Vikings, lowest light box rate in football. They're always loading up the box. The Eagles and the Rams and the Seahawks, real good defense there with the Seahawks, obviously. Fourth highest light box rate. When we find a guy, again, I'm not opposed to having preferences, but it's really just an all things being equal thing. We need to find a guy that can have an answer, right? There is the overarching philosophy of what we want to do. We want to make them uncomfortable. We want takeaways. We want this, we want that, whatever, right? There's the overarching thing that we're trying to do, right? We're trying to stress them in this way or that way or the other way. Then there's the how I'm going to do it with the pieces I have part of it. And so that's where we take the scheme and we apply our roster to the scheme. Again, the scheme is just sort of the big picture, what I'm trying to do to an offense. Then how I employ that scheme is based on my personnel, which is why this whole thing doesn't really matter, because our personnel is going to dictate the scheme anyways, which is why a lot of the times, whether you go out and get a Rams or a Texans or a Vikings guy, it's going to end up being a Packers hybrid of that, which is going to skew it towards something very similar every time. With minor stylistic differences from here to there that you'll be able to notice, like, oh, that seems a little different, or this is a little different, or whatever. But a lot of it's going to end up being the same. And then it comes down to, we need to find a guy that is a good coach, a good communicator, that can get the most out of these guys, that can get the energy out of these guys, that can teach and coach them so that they actually do the thing that you need them to do to provide those answers. And then we need a guy that can do the game planning portion of things. You need to be able to look at that other team and break them down and say, here's how I apply my scheme to their offense and how I want to attack them, big picture. Then there is the micro, which is on game day, applying on a play-to-play basis those things, putting your guys in a position, understanding what the offense is going to do, having that ability, that level of preparation to say, I think in this situation they're going to be doing this, which is you and your staff, which means you have to have a good staff that can help you. And then what is the right play based on my personnel and my scheme to apply to what I think this offense is about to do? Who is the right guy to do those things? Forget their coverage shells. Forget their level of aggression. Who's the right guy to do those things? I don't freaking know. I'll tell you that, I'm still very high on Jim Leonard, because I think, although that may be the absolute wrong answer, and maybe Raheem Morris is the guy. He's got all the experience. He's been a DC, a head coach, all that kind of stuff. Maybe Gannon is the answer for those reasons. He's got the intelligence to be able to do those things, the breakdowns, the ability to apply scheme to personnel and personnel to scheme, and he can check all those boxes. The reason I like Jim Leonard is because I believe he's a hyper intelligent guy that a lot of people are seeking after. He's called plays when he was in Wisconsin, not in the NFL, but he has that ability, that skill set, and was wildly successful in doing it, which is important, because what did he have to do? Even if it was in college, what did he have to do? He had to have his big picture scheme. How do I want to attack? How do I apply this group of players to my philosophy? And then on a play-to-play basis, how do I apply that and attack an offense with that? And he had the most lethal defense in college football during that stretch. It's not to say he can do it again, but he was able to check those boxes and do those things. And also the part where you have to get your players to understand your scheme and to execute your scheme and to do it at a high level. You can't be one of the top defenses, if not the top defense, in college football without guys that have buy-in, intellect, and intensity. So again, yeah, I mean, I would love to grab a guy from the Vikings tree, because then he comes in and makes us look like the Vikings. Okay, but that huge checklist, which of those can he do? Maybe all of them. Maybe he's the guy. But I don't have a lot to go on other than he was sort of Flores' right-hand man. So it's kind of a, see if you can bring that scheme over here. But I don't want to bring a scheme over here. That's such a lazy and incorrect way to do things. And if you have a coach that can't do that part where you apply, that you understand the scheme on such a fundamental level that you can take the pieces and say, how can I answer the question with these pieces? If you can't do that, then you can't go to that next level. You can't be a coordinator. Then you need to stay a position coach where the guys tell you, hey, teach my guys these fundamentals and these techniques. You need to stay down on that level. It's a big leap up to defensive coordinator where you have to have the scheme and then be able to understand how to apply the pieces to the scheme. And so again, I'm a big fan of Leonard for all those reasons. I also think he brings some fun aggression and creativity and all the kinds of things. Even the maybe lesser important aspects. I think he brings all of that. But again, he may not bring it as well as some other guys. I don't know. But just wanted to run through that because again, even I get caught up in this where everything is so black and white. We need to be more aggressive. We need to be running more cover 1, cover 0, cover 2, or even me talking about Fangio, and I don't want a Fangio guy. And again, it's not to say that there isn't something to that if the NFL has quote unquote figured out the Fangio thing. But there are guys that can do it and can apply it, like Fangio, for example, who is applying it currently at a relatively high level, right? So what you run is less important than how you run it and who is running it. All right, we'll take a break here, and we'll be right back. All right, so I wanted to kind of immediately dive into that because it was at the front of my mind, which leaves us with kind of a weird setup here where now we do sort of more of the news and notesy type stuff. There isn't a ton, not a lot really going on. I will say on the college front, and I don't have a ton of info because I'm just in the frickin' weeds, but some of the practices have begun for the East-West Shrine game. I actually have been spending too much time. I've got my, what do you call it? My draft guide, and I since the measurements came out, I started manually inputting the measurements and whatnot. But I wanted to provide some bullet points as to where we're at, because as I said, the draft is massive. It's an unfortunate thing. Some people are psychos and they have a pretty solid understanding of quite a few people and narratives and all that stuff. The draft, for those that are unfamiliar, is such an unbelievably massive thing. The amount of time it would take to fully grasp one prospect is a long time. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of prospects. Now, not all of them are going to be drafted, but you don't know which ones on the back end. You're going to have guys drafted on the consensus big board that are at like 600. And then there's also undrafted free agents, right? So there's almost no end. If you wanted to be like, I want to dedicate as much time as is necessary to understand as much as possible, I would tell you to quit your job and just do nothing but the draft because there's no end to it. So the point is, as things go on, I just want to continually kind of be in it. Here's a little bit, here's a little bit, here's a little bit. And over time, because it feels daunting at the beginning. Like, I don't even know where to freaking begin. As you just interact with it, Go do some mock drafts, read some mock drafts. That'll help you mostly familiarize with the first-round prospects, which is fine. But just as things come up, and it's why things like Packernet After Dark are so good, because people will call in and be like, hey, check out this prospect. And then somebody else will say it. And then you kind of get familiar, like, oh, yeah, that the center from Auburn, right? The guy that tore his ACL. Okay, we know that guy now. Texas Tech edge rusher. Yeah, the Texas Tech. Oh, that's right. They've got a couple guys over there at Texas Tech. They got that edge rusher. They got that defensive tackle. There's that freaking linebacker who's like 6'6", but 220 pounds or something. You know what I mean? Like, these little things will start to stick with you, and as you do it more and more and more, you start to get familiar. And I'm going through that as we're all going through it. It's just some people are more already established than others. It is on today for me, the 23rd, the first day of Shrine Bowl practice. So this is. I mean, it's a pretty big day. It's kind of like the first. The first training camp day for the regular season. This is kind of like the first training camp day for the off season. We get to see college players playing football together. Now, today was just mostly weigh-ins as well as some, eye test stuff. There's some videos floating around out there. And, of course, guys are probably going to overhype certain things like, oh, check out this catch or whatever. Good. Give me all that. One of the big things at the Shrine Bowl right now is that the main focus is on the quarterbacks. There's a decent amount of quote-unquote star power. Cade Klubnik out of Clemson is there. Jalen Daniels is there, not Jalen Daniels out of Kansas is there. They're going to be headlining the East team. And then you're going to have on the West team, Haynes King out of Georgia Tech and Miller Moss out of Louisville. The primary guy that everybody's watching here is going to be Klubnik. They're trying to see if this is a legit day 2 prospect. I still remember when Cade Klubnik was, it might have even been last year. I don't know if it was last year or for this year's cycle or what, but he was like the number 1 prospect, which is so funny. When the 2026 draft ends, immediately, some people, myself included, are going to run right to 2027 and start trying to familiarize with a couple things. And you'll see things like that where it's like, oh, I guess Cade Klubnik is a top guy next year, huh? And it's just completely different by the time things roll around. But you never know which things are going to be different. So you take everything kind of seriously and just see how it progresses. Then you've got sort of the superstar defender, Harold Perkins Jr. out of LSU. He was at one point also sort of a top 10 prospect. He did end up changing his position and had an injury, which has kind of caused him to cool off a little bit. He is dropped on the consensus big board all the way down to 90. So he's dropped a little ways. But as far as East-West Shrine goes, we'll call them superstars. Some of the quote-unquote weigh-in winners, Dazon Stribling, Ole Miss wide receiver. I always love my Ole Miss wide receivers, man. He's currently on the consensus big board at 203. He's already moved up 6 spots. That's the other thing about this time of year. Some guys will be way down that need to be way higher. We've already identified one. I forget who he is. One of those offensive linemen that's like, I don't know. It's stupid to think that he would be drafted that late. But, a really solid weigh-in where people thought he was not going to be that could propel him way up. Now, to be clear, consensus big board is different than NFL teams. It's not to say NFL teams are like, whoa, that's they know, and they have their boards different than this. Consensus big board is media board, and we're going off information, and some of that information is bad, and once we figure that out, we adjust accordingly. The other guy is Cincinnati linebacker Jake Galday. There's an article here over at NFL.com. Eric Galko, I think, wrote this. Or no. Yeah, Eric Edholm wrote it. Galko was the one with the quote. Galladay possesses a pro-ready frame. He's able to help NFL teams in a variety of ways, blitzing the A-gap, rushing around the edge, stopping the run from off the ball, and dropping back into zones. Galko believes Galladay will have an earnest shot at cracking round 1 with top 50 as his floor. Quote, I think we've got a handful of guys that could be first-round picks. I think Galladay is one of the 30 best players in this class. Teams are oftentimes now not maybe valuing linebacker in the same way as they used to, but having guys like Galladay who can do all those things, he's a really special player. He's currently sitting at pick 62, which is right around where the Packers are going to be picking. And I know, linebacker isn't our biggest need. I get that. Doesn't mean it won't happen. Let's see. Other news and notes. Skylar Bell, wide receiver out of UConn, currently listed at 93. Again, probably not primary on the Packers list of needs, but as I mentioned on Packernet After Dark, we may be losing Romeo and Wicks, causing us to be at a little bit of a deficit. Skylar Bell, considered the top receiver at the East-West Shrine Bowl, described as advertised, with movement skills similar to Jamar Chase with his fluidity and twitch. Obviously an overstatement. That's very common this time of year. Had a highlight where he put Nebraska cornerback Syer Wright in a blender on an out route and showed excellent footwork on the sideline. Jalen Daniels was a surprise standout. Some scouts felt he was the best quarterback of the group, even over Klubnik. Obviously, this is day one of practice, but, again. Showed great leadership, hyped up his receivers, layered the ball well, remained calm in the pocket. Only quarterback to consistently get the offense into the right looks. Harold Perkins was described as being the best player on the field. It dominated backs on backers, whatever those drills are, winning cleanly with swim moves against running backs and flashing consistent athleticism. Klubnik had the best command in the huddle. And offense used hard counts to draw offenses and manipulate defenses with his eyes. Darrell Jackson Jr. is a defensive lineman out of Texas A&M/FSU. He is consensus 82 overall, so in certainly a potential second, third round pick for the Packers. Said absolute tank, over 6'5", 328 with 35-inch arms, dominant in one-on-ones, controlled the point of attack, and walked Louisville center Pete Nigra back into the quarterback like he was on skates. Those were the top guys at the event. The sort of next up stock guys that did raise their stock: Wesley Williams, edge rusher out of Duke. This is a much later round prospect, but described as being twitched up and explosive out of his stance, consistently bent the edge and had offensive tackles on their heels, won reps with inside speed rushes and an array of moves. Chase Roberts, wide receiver out of BYU, head and shoulders above the other West receivers. Again, another guy that's way down here. He's consensus 444. So putting out a performance where you're the best receiver on your team is a big deal. Technical route runner with a huge frame, 6'3", who knows how to get open, diligently studied the playbook during media sessions, which paid off on the field. Jackson Kuwach is an edge rusher out of Miami of Ohio. Made the play of the day, leaping interception in zone coverage that likely would have been a pick six. Looks like he belongs physically, 6'3", 230, and moves very well. I think they might be playing him at linebacker, even though he's listed as an edge rusher on the consensus board. Otherwise, he's going to be a very small edge rusher. The other two guys, Nolan Rucci, offensive tackle out of Penn State. Another guy that is consensus 450s, measured a legit 6'8", had a nice week already, looks good in pass blocking, had an impressive rep during driving a Wisconsin edge rusher into the ground. And then you've got Jagger or Jaeger Burton, however you say it. He is an offensive lineman, interior offensive lineman out of Kentucky for the East team. Says highly impressive in one-on-ones and team sessions. Played both center and guard, locking up defenders in back-to-back reps. He's at consensus 371. So a lot of these guys are kind of UDFAs trying to be day three picks. You know what I mean? Day three meaning 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round. Probably, 5th, 6th, 7th, more likely 6th, 7th, more likely 7th. But again, the back end of these, consensus boards and whatnot, they get shuffled pretty quick. The top end, the first round, it moves a little bit. Some of these guys are going to skyrocket. So, all right. That's that. I did have a little minor laughing at the Bears thing, but I obviously don't want to save that for dead last. We'll maybe do that tomorrow, although I do want to do some previews for the playoff games that we have coming up. So we'll see how it goes. You all have a great rest of your day. Again, appreciate your all support. You guys are great. And do me a favor, just for fun, take a couple seconds and look at packernetpodcast.com. You don't need to do anything. You'll know why I want you there as soon as you go there. I can't stop doing stupid things. So go play and have fun. And I hope to see you there, literally. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.